Hello, and welcome to another episode of Sum of Our Parts, the podcast where two friends talk about the movies that add up to make us who we are. I'm Lindsay,
And I'm Jim.
and this week, Jim made his pick. We are into November, out of spooky season. We are approaching Veterans Day. So, Jim, I know your pick is themed around that. So, tell us what movie you had us watch.
Well, it was kind of hard to narrow down my first choice, but to start off the month with, I chose MASH, the movie. Came out in 1970. I remember seeing this in the movie theaters, but as I'm sure a lot of people know, it spawned a long running TV series that actually it sort of followed the plot lines of the movie, but the movie is very different from in the tone, I think, and then also the portrayal of the main characters. So the movie made a big impression not only on me, but the whole world, and brought out some feelings I think that were at the time when it came out at the height of the Vietnam War,
Hmm.
more anti-war, maybe even anti-military,
Hmm.
irreverent of the military, and sort of had that same theme or that same feeling at the time. So it may not be a popular choice for a movie to start off the month of Veterans Day, but I think it's a very important one.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely. And it's one I think that's like it's in the Library of Congress and Academy Film Archives, like recognized with a lot of Academy Award nominations. So I think one that had significant resonance at the time and since then.
mhm. Now, had you ever seen the movie?
I had not the movie or the TV show. I
Oh,
like
okay.
know of the TV show because
Hmm.
I'm a person with a TV. But I have never seen any of it. I think it
uh,
was just, it is before my time and not
sure.
necessarily something of interest to me when I was a kid. If it didn't come on Nick at Night, I probably didn't watch it. So, but yeah, so like I've heard of it. I'm familiar. I didn't. I think I was probably more familiar with the show
Hmm.
versus the movie because I think like if I think MASH, I think of like Alan Alda.
Sure.
So this was kind of new to me, but I'm happy to watch it. Like I know like Robert Altman directed it, and he's kind of one of our sort of most
Yeah.
revered American directors. So and I'd never seen any of his other movies, so this is the first like Robert Altman movie for me to watch. So that was interesting to me, and it was interesting to me to watch the movie versus the show because I know when I was reading about it that, like you said, like the show is different, and Robert Altman not a fan of the show because
Hmm.
like he felt like he was trying to make a certain point with the movie and the show kind of went against that.
And I can you and I discussed briefly before we started recording that I had read, well, this was one of several books that were written about the surgical hospital, so that
Hmm.
it wasn't just one book. But I remember reading the original one about three doctors, and then the tone and the mood of the book of the movie reflects the tone of the book at the time. Where the TV show, of course, it was TV, from the mid to late 70s through the 80s, and while very popular, I guess probably had to, you know, adhere to some of the stricter regulations for national TV. So,
Hmm. Would you
and
say that the TV show is more, so I imagine there's less of the like vulgarity
oh
in the
yeah,
TV show. Would
very
you say
much
that
so.
it's like a lighter tone, like more funny or more
Hmm. It was lighter toned,
Mhm.
and there was usually in most episodes there was a subject that was brought up, but it was treated with more comedy than. And although the movie I think is funny, it's a dark comedy to me.
Hmm.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
especially the graphic images of, and we'll talk about that. The differences between the portrayals of the work that's done in the surgical hospital. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, MASH stands for Mobile Army Surgical Hospital.
I
That's
was gonna say we might should
yeah. So
explain that.
um,
It is an acronym like everything else in the military and government.
in the military and the government, and that being said, for those of you all who don't know, then we're not going to go into detail, but Lindsay and I come from a background of working with veterans
Hmm.
for the government. So we're familiar with, not only the acronyms and the branches of service and so on, but also with some of the things that are depicted about
The general
combat.
vibes.
Yeah, some of the general attitude and the tone sometimes of the service members, and that's something that I think that I've over the years that I've worked with veterans from, a lot of conflicts that, while the eras and the time and the locations change of the conflicts or whatever it may be, I think some of the same attitudes and the same, behaviors still persist, depending on the branch and so on. They still sort of, there's always going to be your irreverent people, and then your
Mhm.
by the book people, and then the ones that just are just trying to get by. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true because I've watched probably more media that takes place in more recent conflicts. Like this one, which I think you mentioned, the movie came out during the Vietnam War, but the movie takes place in the Korean War.
correct.
But I mean, like I think of like the movie like Jarhead,
Mm-hmm.
like everybody's like kind of goofing off and stuff
Mm-hmm.
they're in like Kuwait. But that takes place during the first Persian Gulf War in the early 90s. But I think it is like a similar kind of atmosphere,
Yeah, or
behavior.
yeah, well, or the Hurt Locker,
Hmm.
which is a more recent depiction,
Yeah.
and then, but I think and perhaps that's if you go back and look at war movies, there's always the maybe the it's almost like school movies. There's a class clown. There's the one that goes right by the rules and sticks by the strict, and then there's one that's sort of in between. That's sort of like, hey, whatever, I'll just deal with
Hmm.
this the best way I can and I'll get through this. So,
Yeah. And
but
I think it's an interesting dynamic too that in this movie, obviously because of the Korean War, and then if you're looking at like wars of that era, World War II, Korean War, and then Vietnam,
mm-hmm,
a lot of these people were drafted versus the Persian Gulf War. That's not happening. So I
exactly.
think that also maybe plays into like people, like these people didn't sign up for this. So they're
Oh,
not
yeah.
necessarily going to be so like you said, reverent
Mm-hmm.
of the military and the hierarchy and the rules. They're like, listen, you made me be here. Like I will do the surgeries I need to do, but like I'm not like
Right.
jazzed to be
Yeah,
here.
exactly. So, yeah, especially when you look at the whole premises that it takes place at the mobile hospital, that these are medical professionals, whether it's
Hmm.
the physicians or the doctors, and then we meet, the other positions, there's a dentist,
Hmm.
the head of dentistry and so on and so forth. And then that they have careers back in the United States, and then
Right.
now here they are in the middle of Korea, and then
Right. Living in a tent.
right, in deplorable weather conditions.
Just like
So
muddy. Like that's just like what it looks like. That's what I kept thinking when they're doing surgery. I'm like, oh, this is so unsanitary. And I mean, it's
hmm
like they're doing the best they can contamination wise, but I was like, ah.
well, the term that was coined, especially during the TV series, and I don't know if it's ever mentioned in the movie, but they called it meatball surgery, and then because everything looked like a meatball. That
Mhm.
was it was just like red and looked like ground up meat. And
Yeah.
so, but yeah, so anyway, so well, that's interesting that because I didn't know if you had seen the movie or not. So, and we can go into it to get your impression, and I'm interested to see how you felt about seeing it for the first time. So,
Yeah, for sure. I thought before we talk about I know you mentioned it's based on a book. So it's based on Richard Hooker's 1968 novel, which is called MASH, a novel about three army doctors, and it follows three specific characters in the movie that we'll get into, but it's Hawkeye, Trapper John, and Duke, they call them like the swamp men. They call their
mhm,
tent the swamp. So they're those three guys. And I mentioned it's directed by Robert Altman, like famous American director, also a veteran of the United States Air Force. Um, he directed The Long Goodbye, Nashville, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, The Player, Shortcuts, Gosford Park, lots of other things. And the movie was written by the screenwriter is named Ring Lardner Jr. He also wrote movies like Woman of the Year and Laura. And he was also one of the Hollywood 10 who was blacklisted by the House Un-American Activities Committee because he was an active kind of leftist communist. Like he was supporting like the rebels in Spain against Franco and all this stuff. So that's also to me an interesting like perspective here because right, like the point of the Korean War was to like fight against communism.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
And same with the Vietnam War. We're
yeah,
fighting against communism. So
the spread of communism, and by
yeah,
the
I
way,
was
that I was just going to say, and Laura, you mentioned Laura, a classic,
mhm.
great, but probably one of the best movies ever made. So,
Yeah. But and I think it's interesting too. I was reading that like people there's this reputation, I guess, that Robert Altman like deviated a lot from the script. But Ringlarder was like in his memoir, he was like he didn't actually like he moved some things around and there's
mm-hmm,
some of like Donald Sutherland and Elliot Gould's like dialogue, they kind of improvise a little bit, but it does ultimately have like all the sequences are there with the beginning, middle, and end. They're just like maybe shifted around a little bit. So
mm-hmm. I did read also that I think this was one of Altman's earlier films, or
yeah,
one,
I
and
think it was like his second movie or something like that. It was
it,
very early.
and a lot of people were not happy with the preliminary rushes about how he had the dialogues, the
Hmm.
talking go over each other. But as we discussed a little bit earlier, really that's how people talk.
Yeah, that's how we talk.
That's how we talk. Exactly. So we just did it just now. I mean, it's like, you don't wait for someone usually to finish a sentence, particularly if there's a spirited conversation going on. And then
Right.
there's a lot of crosstalk, especially as
Hmm.
we get into the movie in the operating room and so on, because there are different teams working on different patients. And then you sort of hear what all's going on. It's almost like
Yeah.
just a low rumble,
Hmm.
as opposed to specific dialogue. It's like people talking to each other over each patient, and then they're either saying what they need or what they're doing or what they're looking for,
Hmm.
and it's sort of just, but it worked, and
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that in addition to working with veterans, we also have worked in a medical setting. And I think that also feels very true to life. Like if you go into like the emergency department,
mm-hmm.
it's not like quiet conversation happening. It's a lot
No,
of talking at the same time.
sometimes a lot of yelling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So I think that's like generally, I think that is sort of my understanding of like the Robert Altman like vibe is I think they called it like new realism. Like he's
mm-hmm,
very like trying to do things that are true to life. And I think that's maybe not something people, especially maybe at the time, were used to in movies because there is this sense of like heightened reality in movies. And he's trying to make it like incredibly grounded in real life. So like with the cross talking, with the like, I mentioned this when we were talking before, but like for the first chunk of the movie, it's like, okay, well, nothing is like happening. It's kind
mm-hmm,
of just like life. Just we're just puttering around in life. And then um some of the things that made me like, ugh, like the way they are with women, I'm like, okay, but this also is like how it is here. Like if I was in a working for a mobile hospital in the 50s in the Korean War, this is what it would be like.
mm-hmm.
Um, as offensive as it is to my 2024 uh lady sensibilities. So I think there is this sense of like really grounded realism in this movie and I guess Altman's movies generally that I think maybe is just a departure from some of what people expect in a movie.
And I think it sort of set the tone for movies in general going forward,
Hmm.
from this time period. Because, like I said, this came out in 1970, so this was maybe the bridge between old Hollywood, classic Hollywood, I guess, and then and the new class coming up. So
Hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll get into the movie.
give us the intro, and then
Sure.
the sort of the sleepy scenes leading up to.
Yeah, so we open with a helicopter, and it's like a fun 1950s helicopter. It looks like a bubble. And the crazy thing about these helicopters that are airlifting people, it's the injured people are like on a stretcher outside, like they're
Mm-hmm.
strapped to the side of the helicopter, which
Mm-hmm.
seems terrifying. Like I'm wounded and I'm just like floating through space, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And the song, there's a song playing. It's a sort of like nice 70s folky ditty called Suicide is Painless. It's the music is by Johnny Mandel, who did like all the music for this movie. The lyrics I read are actually by Mike Altman, 14-year-old son of Robert Altman. So it is the song. It's called Suicide is Painless, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what it's
And
about.
it's also the theme song for the TV show,
Okay.
but they don't sing the lyrics. But
Oh,
it's the
nice.
same. But it is "Suicide is Painless."
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And they sing it again. It plays again later, at a an appropriate moment,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps. We get to see kind of the lieutenant colonel of this unit. His name is Henry Blake, and he's talking to Radar. Radar is the only Gary Berghoff. He's the only actor that, which I think you mentioned, that is in the movie and the TV show, also playing Radar. And it's just a funny beginning because he's like relaying stuff to Radar to like take notes on, and Radar is just talking the entire time also. So it's like, how are you getting any of this information?
Well, when you listen to it, it's like as he's telling Radar what he wants to be done, Radar is saying, and then Radar saying, I'm going to do exactly what you're telling me to do. And then I'm going to
Yeah.
get I-Core on the line and I'm going to get this and I'm going to get that and I'm going to get, whatever. So, and then, yeah, Radar's like always like one step ahead of Colonel Blake, it seems like. So,
Yes. And then it's established, we get some text on screen that we're in Korea, which I think they wanted to emphasize since, again, this is, as you mentioned, Jim, this comes out during the height of the Vietnam War. They're like, this is Korea. And we
mm-hmm.
get also an excerpt of MacArthur's letter. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
think if people know MacArthur, like, uh, not doing great, not in a great spot with Harry Truman around this time.
Yeah, he got
Uh,
fired actually.
yeah,
So,
he got fired.
yeah.
So they had some conflicting ideas on things. And so we get an excerpt of him and then some other like quotes of like Eisenhower, like, I want to go to Korea. Like really profound quote. And then we meet sort of one of our main characters, Hawkeye, Captain Hawkeye Pierce, played by Donald Sutherland, who is a lot of these people. I was thinking, I was like, oh, they've been in a lot, we've seen
mm-hmm.
them in these other movies we've talked about. So Donald Sutherland was in Animal House.
Mm-hmm.
He actually, the late great Donald Sutherland, he only recently died a couple months ago. But I think again, an incredibly like prolific and talented actor.
Oh, yeah.
Um, for me, like I mean, most recently, people my age, like he's President Snow in the Hunger Games movies. He is Mr. Bennett in the 2005 Pride and Prejudice movie, but he's was also in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Don't Look Now, Ordinary People, this movie, lots of things.
Clute.
Clute, yes, with
Mm-hmm.
Jane Fonda.
Mm-hmm.
So like in a million things. But anyway, so he's a captain. He's just arrived basically, and he's supposed to be waiting for his car to be taken to his like camp. Um, and essentially, this part did make me laugh. The like officer talking to him, telling him that like his driver's gonna come is black and is kind of mean to him, and he walks away, and then he goes, "Wow, racist." I was like, "Oh my god." But essentially, he meets another surgeon. He's a surgeon, and he meets another surgeon called Duke, played by Tom Skerritt, another frequenter of this podcast. He was in both Steel Magnolias and Alien.
So
Um,
I think Tom is our first three-time winner
I
in our.
think so. Yeah,
Is he?
he's
I
our
thought about that
three-peater.
when I was watching that. And I thought, well, he's been in each of our selections, so now he's showing up in mine again. So
Yeah, yeah. Who
yeah,
knows?
uh huh.
I gotta see what else he's in, but if he's in another of mine. But yeah, Tom Skerritt. But they essentially are like they're not waiting around for their driver. They just steal a Jeep. that's there. And the officer, that black officer from before, tries to send the military police after them, but their car like backfires and they basically start fighting each other instead of going after them. So they're just driving along in their stolen Jeep. Um, just like it looks like they're driving like down a coast almost, just like the wind in their hair, bopping along. And then they're in the camp. It's kind of they're sitting and eating with the rest of the team there. We meet one of the nurses. Uh, they call her Dish because
Lieutenant
she's
Dish.
Lieutenant Dish because she's hot and she's being just like fully openly hit on, despite being like I'm married.
Hmm.
And Hawkeye does kind of step up for her. Then of course, like she and Hawkeye like hook up kind of the rest of the movie until she goes home. That's a common theme throughout. Almost all these people are married, but they're like it's kind of like when in Rome, or it's maybe more of like a what happens in Korea stays in Korea.
Or if you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. As
Yes, yes, lots of various cliches that apply. Um, So we get to kind of, I think a little bit of this is just sort of like, this is what life is like, is that
hmm
that's where we kind of get into things here. So we see them doing surgery, as I mentioned. They're like in a tent, like the floor is mud,
hmm
and they're just doing multiple beds in one room. Obviously, not ideal in terms of hygiene and sanitation for infection control, but you're in a field hospital, so like it is what it is.
Right.
Um, So we get a little slice of that. And I think that one of the things that gets established is that despite like Duke and Hawkeye and then later other characters we meet, their kind of general irreverence and goofiness, these people are like good surgeons.
Mhm. And care about their patients.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. We also meet so the Duke and Hawkeye live in a big tent with a third gentleman named Frank Burns, who they don't get along with. He's played by Robert Duvall, another famous actor. I don't know that we've had him in anything yet, but I'm sure he'll be coming back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he's in The Godfather. He's the Tom, the consigliere. He was in To Kill a Mockingbird, Apocalypse Now, Falling Down, Sling Blade. He's another one of those people that's like in a million things.
Bullet.
Bullet. He's in Kicking and Screaming
hmm
with Will Ferrell. He
Yeah.
plays the dad. Um, maybe he was in another movie we talked about because I feel like I mentioned that before.
Maybe. Could be. We'll have to review.
I know. I need to make like a spreadsheet of like our
hmm
recurring actors and
Right. Yeah.
we'll see who's
At
I think Tom Skerritt is in the lead right now.
maybe at the
Um
end of the of calendar year, we should give out an award. To
yes.
yeah,
Yes.
the most
Our
mentioned.
most prolific actor of the podcast.
Yes.
Um So, yeah, he is very like you can tell he's very serious and like by the book, he's like constantly praying. He's very like very into God. He's sitting there doing the Our Father as like Duke and Hawkeye are kind of like heckling him openly. Um, yeah, there's also a point where everyone is singing Onward Christian Soldiers. Speaking of God, we also have a chaplain there. Uh Chaplain Mulcahy, is that his last name?
Father Mulcahy.
Father Mulcahy. His nickname is Dago Red.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what that was from, but he's played by Rene Auberjonois, who is from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I feel like is like the thing he was most known for outside of this. He has like a very recognizable face.
hmm
Um, but he's also very like kind of naive to like the sort of vulgarity of the some of the other folks, especially Hawkeye and Duke and their eventual uh fellow swamp men. Let's see. As I mentioned, we see like Hawkeye and Dish hooking up. That's what everybody's doing. And Hawkeye is talking to uh Henry, the colonel, Henry
Blake.
Blake,
Yeah.
Colonel Blake, about they need a he kept saying they need a chest cutter. And at first I was like, oh, are they asking for like a surgical saw? Like I thought they were asking for a piece of equipment. But
That's understandable. Yeah.
they wanted a cardiac surgeon. And eventually they get one, and it's kind of like a weird scene because the guy like won't talk. Like Duke's trying to talk to him and he won't answer, but then it turns out it's like Hawkeye's friend from college. So Hawkeye just starts like saying things that like he knows will kind of get a response from him, basically. Uh his name is Trapper John, is his nickname. Um he has a last name, but I can't remember it. What's his
McIntyre.
McIntyre.
Yeah.
Uh
Sorry. Yeah.
no, you're good. That's I hope that you
And
would know.
and he brought a jar of olives with him so
Yes.
he can have those in his martinis, because that's the only civilized way to drink a martini.
Exactly. That's the other thing. They have like a little Korean boy that like does their laundry and makes them martinis, makes them like mixed cocktails. His name is
Hoja,
Hojan.
Hojon.
Um, which I read that I think like in the book he dies.
He does.
And that because later in the movie, which we'll talk about, there's a part where like the thing goes by with a dead body.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's supposed to be him. But like in
Mm-hmm.
the movie, they don't ever like
No, but
say that.
yeah, because in the plot line plays out where they're he has everybody's conscripted into the Korean army,
Hmm.
and then Hojon, he has to go as well, and they try to keep him out, but he doesn't. It doesn't work, and then he subsequently gets killed.
Yeah. And I remember reading like in the book there's a part where Radar gets blood, and it's actually in the book it's for
Save
they're trying to
Hojon.
save Hojan.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's interesting because like in the movie it's like they had the part where like he's being presumably him is being driven away, like
Mm-hmm.
covered up dead, but there was
Mm-hmm.
none of that other stuff. So it's like because I was wondering at the end when that happens, like why do they all look so somber when this like one dead body is being
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
driven by?
and it doesn't come out in the movie, right? But those, if you read the book and so on, you sort of put two and two together.
Yeah. So, anyways, so they have Hojan making cocktails for them. He makes um and that's sort of like how Hawkeye knows that it's Trapper John, that he has his olives for to make his martini. Trapper John is played by Elliot Gould, another very like famous prolific actor. He for people my age, you know him, he's Ruben in Ocean's 11. So we know like older Elliot Gould.
Mm-hmm.
But he's Ruben in Ocean's 11. He also has a brief cameo in Ocean's 8. He's also in The Long Goodbye, which is another Altman movie. I
Mm-hmm.
think one of his first big movies is Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice. He has done a lot of TV work too. He played Ross's dad on Friends. Um, and he was on like Ray Donovan, etc. So he's been on in a lot of stuff. He was also famously married to Barbara Streisand.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which I get. I like a young Elliot Gould. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
tall, dark hair, the
Mm-hmm.
mustache. It, it,
Mm-hmm.
it like
Yeah.
works for him. Um, but yeah, so he's a cardiac surgeon, Trapper John. He ends up getting moved in. I forget how they did it, but they got Hawkeye and Duke got Burns moved out of their tent and
And
Trapper John moved in.
Trapper moved in. Yeah. So
Um, but yeah, they know each other, they go way back. And then we meet another new person. Her name is uh she's a lieutenant, I think, Houlihan.
yeah, Margaret Houlihan.
Margaret Houlihan, who's going to be the head nurse there.
A lot of
And
Irish people.
yeah,
McIntyre, Mulcahy, Houlihan.
Houlihan,
Mm-hmm.
that's true.
Uh-huh.
Um, so she's going to come be the head nurse, and you can tell she's another by the book kind of lady. She's in there kind of being walked around by Henry, just getting the lay of the land, trying to inspect things.
Was she? Yeah, because she's going to be the new chief nurse.
Yes. So, and we get a glimpse of uh Frank Burns and his work. And Not great. He's like got a patient that he's presumably done surgery on, and it seems like he needs some kind of dressing because I think his like suture was bad.
Mm-hmm.
The guy has like it looks like he has got like 10 pounds of bandages on it. Um, and so he's sending one of his kind of underlings who's played by Bud Cort, who you might know from like Harold and Maude, or the episode of Criminal Minds where these old people that own a crematorium are kidnapping children.
Ooh,
Um,
ooh.
and
For,
occasionally cremating them.
and for those of you who aren't aware, if you've ever been on Criminal Minds, Lindsay knows the episode.
Yes. If you've been on Criminal Minds and quite possibly on Law and Order SVU, I probably know who you are.
Yep, probably know who you
Tom
are.
Skerritt, also on an episode of Law and Order SVU. Uh, other people probably have too, but Tom Skerritt, I
Elliot
remember
Gould was
his.
in Law and Order. He played
Yeah,
a shopkeeper who
nice.
killed a robber.
If you're an actor, like you've been on one of the Law and Orders at some point. Like,
Gotta be right.
I can't imagine you
Yeah,
weren't.
I think.
Even European actors. Like,
Mm,
anyways, Houlihan, it's here. We see Burns, Robert Duvall, is like shouting at like his underling to like bring him different dressing and like suture so he can like fix this guy's wound. And then the guy dies and he blames him.
mm, yeah, he says, "Oh, you didn't get it to me in time, or
Yeah,
whatever,
or like
and
he brought him like the wrong, not the
wrong
exact.
needle, or yeah,
Yeah.
or something." And
And he blames him, and then later we see and he like rips into this kid, and Trapper is in the same room attending to one of his patients, so he hears it all. And then Trapper and Burns are in like the supply room, and Trapper, oh, he's like, are you almost done for the day? And he was like, oh yeah. And he's like, okay, good, because I want to make sure you have time to sleep this off. And then he punches him, but it like hurts him. He like knocks himself off his feet. It hurts Trapper more than it hurts Burns. They're both just like falling over, knocking over boxes of like suture equipment and stuff. And then, of course, at this moment is when Henry's coming by with Lieutenant Houlihan to like show her around. And he's like, McIntyre, you are under arrest. And he's like, I assure you, we usually run like a tighter ship than this. But he deserved it. Burns deserved it.
exactly,
Because he let someone die and then blame someone else.
and we also know by this time that they really don't run a tighter ship than this.
They do not at all. No,
Yeah,
no. But they said John's gonna be arrested and confined to his quarters, and really nothing ever comes from that. That was clearly something Henry said in front of Houlihan to be like, this is we don't tolerate this. And it's like, actually,
right. Yeah,
but we do. We
yeah,
kind of do.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Because Frank's a dummy and Trapper John's my best surgeon. So,
Right. That's the thing. So like the very by the book guy is actually like horrible at his job.
mm,
Um One of the other things that I took note of is that throughout the movie we get these like very random and funny announcements over the like the loudspeaker on the camp. I wrote this one down. They were like urine specimens are required for personnel, and then like 2 seconds later it's like please disregard the last transmission. It's just all these random things, and then a lot of like Japanese people singing Johnny Mandel songs.
uh,
They get like Japanese radio.
but and just, yeah, it's a running gag all throughout the
Yeah.
movie. You know, the guy and the guy who does the announcements, he stumbles over his words, or he stutters, or he mispronounces, and
Yeah. And he's like constantly being like, actually, no, never mind.
yeah, and
So
or it's about movies that they're playing in camp that night.
yes, yes.
You
And
know,
it's funny because at least one of the movies is a movie about the Korean War.
and yeah, and it's always like the Hollywood press release, about the movie. Watch our boys as they fight their way through, the battle of the bulge. With a laugh in her or smile on her face and a laugh in her heart, or whatever. So
Yes.
it's really very funny, I thought. So
Yes, yes. No, I might have written other ones down, but that one made me laugh the most. But it was like,
yeah,
urine specimens are required, and then they're like, disregard that last
just
transmission.
well, that and the one where he says short arm inspection will be done at such and such a time. You don't know what that is.
No.
Oh, it's where they It's where they check for hernias
Aha,
in
aha,
men.
aha. Yes.
So, and
Okay.
they call it
Okay.
a short arm inspection.
Nice. Nice.
Turn your head and cough.
Yes. See, I'm like Father Mulcahy. I am a
That's okay.
an
It's
innocent dove here. Anyways, Lieutenant Houlihan decides she's gonna talk to Hawkeye to get some information, like how are the nurses, like what's it like here. Um, and she starts asking him about Burns. She's very into like the hierarchy and like I said, she's very by the book. She's asking him about Burns and she's like, "Oh, seems like such a good surgeon." And Hawkeye's like, "No, like he's horrible at surgery.
right. He, he's an idiot.
He is actively bad. He kills people all the time." Like
And
he
then
is not.
blames other people for it.
Yeah. She also does not like the nicknames.
Right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
not into the nicknames because he's talking about, Hawkeye
Yeah.
and Duke and Trapper, and she's like, Dr. McIntyre,
Right. Yeah. Or by
Captain,
their rank, captain,
Captain Pierce, Captain
Yeah.
McIntyre, all this.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's although is Lieutenant is higher,
Lieutenant's lower than
lower than
captain, but
Captain.
but Burns is a major, so he's higher.
Yeah.
And then Blake is the lieutenant colonel, so
Hmm.
he's the yeah. But since I think Houlihan is the ranking officer amongst the nurses, she's the chief nurse.
That
So,
makes sense.
but so
Um,
she's sort of like on a level with the captain, as far as
mhm.
talking as equals, but
Yeah, that makes sense. Because it's Dish is a lieutenant too,
is a
isn't
lieutenant
she?
as well. Yeah. So
Yeah.
for whatever reason, though, that Margaret is it was named chief nurse. So
Yeah. So yeah, also while this is happening, just to get a slice of how things go, there are operations being done and the lights go off in the operating theater. And they're
mm-hmm.
all just like, oh man, oh god.
The some of the operating room scenes are pretty graphic too.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of blood.
And yeah, and it's not like
Viscera.
yeah, and it's not like the bright stuff. It's everything sort of like almost has a grayish tone to it. To me, it does, and it
Mm-hmm.
could be because supposedly the quality of the light is not that good, but everything
Mm-hmm.
just sort of they're up to their elbows in blood, you know.
Yeah. And everything looks just like dingy. I think it is like what you said, like we're used to like if I'm watching TV and someone's doing surgery, it's like a very bright, like
Mm-hmm.
sterile thing and we're in like a tent
Yeah.
with like a light swinging from a pole
Mm-hmm.
basically, right? So like they're in like their whites, but they're kind of like everything just feels like a little bit dingy.
Yeah,
Like they
that's a
have
good way
not
to put
quite
it.
bleached them well enough and yeah. But I think that speaks to the reality of like a field hospital in especially in the 50s.
Yeah.
I mean surgery generally in the 50s, but like a field hospital in the middle of Korea.
Mm-hmm.
Um definitely. But we get Houlihan is very over it, and she's typing a letter to the general about um, the the swamp men, and basically this whole outfit
Right.
is
Yeah. The lack of discipline and
yeah,
yeah,
and
the going to hell
she's
on a runaway train.
basically so, and Burns is in there with her, like giving her um suggestions of like what to add because obviously they're on the same page, right? They are like, let's be
Right.
by the book. We love the ranks, we love the hierarchy. Like these people are degenerates. Da 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 da. Doesn't matter if we're doing good medicine, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
The discipline is what matters. And this is like getting them also both like very hot and bothered,
It's
like
getting
writing
worked
up
up.
disciplinary records.
Oh yeah.
Um, it's like which is like, I mean, whatever works for you. Um, and they start like making out. um, and then she sort of like wrenches away and she's like, okay, I gotta go like send this letter. Meanwhile, she was wearing red lipstick and now it's like all over both of their faces. I wrote another note, all the announcements, LOL. Anyways, later they reconnect and they're taking
hmm
things to the next level. They're gonna start having sex. Radar happens to be walking by the tent at the time and catches this. So he slips a microphone, like the PA microphone, under the flap of the tent. And at first they're just broadcasting it like to the little control room so that like, Hawkeye and Trapper and like I think
Duke
Dish is
and
there, Duke,
yeah,
like
yeah,
their little group can listen. And eventually they broadcast it to the whole camp.
yeah. They flip a switch or something, don't
Yeah,
they? And
so
then
that it like
it comes through the PA
through the
speakers
PA system.
like the announcements do.
Yes. And this is how Lieutenant Houlihan gets her nickname because she's like, kiss my hot lips. So then they just start calling her Hot Lips, which I think like that I knew from like the show that there was a
That's Houlihan.
Hot
Yeah.
Lips Houlihan. Um, and this is also when once it's broadcasting through the loudspeakers, they're like, oh,
Oh,
we are being listened
yeah, they can
to.
hear themselves because there's like that
Yes.
feedback echo.
Yeah. So then she's like, oh no, oh God. And she's like super embarrassed. And she's like in the chow hall and they're calling her hot lips and she's just like, oh, and, like throwing her food, throws her food down basically and like storms out. She's spilling soup everywhere.
I know.
By
Yeah.
the way, I was like, you're just dumping this soup all over. This is a part that I was like, I do kind of they are like fully harassing this woman. um
True.
which like I get on one hand she's like the quote unquote like bad guy, but I'm also like they're fully harassing this woman. But oh, I also love this next part because then Hawkeye sits down with Burns and is talking, and it's like Henry is looking the colonel from the outside is like, oh great, like they're getting along. Hawkeye and Burns are talking, and he's asking Radar to like listen in slash like read their lips to be like, oh, what are they saying?
Well, and that's the reason I don't know if you, that's why they call him radar.
Mm.
Is supposedly he can hear or he can read lips. He knows what they're saying, like from a distance. So
Yeah, and he's kind of like, they're just talking. But what's actually happening is Hawkeye's like essentially like taunting Burns about hot lips and like having sex with her. And I think Radar tells the chief he's asking for professional advice, I think is what he says.
yeah,
Um, so essentially what Hawkeye's doing is provoking him to beat him up so that he'll get sent away. And eventually he does. Um, Hawkeye's just like, "Oh my God, get off of me! His hands are around my neck!" Like, and then Burns ends up getting loaded onto a little MP cart in a straitjacket.
I love that part where he's
So
like just
then,
sitting there and he's got the straight jacket on.
yeah, so that he can get a psych eval. Um, And then we get there's a scene. It's interesting too because there's always these contrasts, right? So like Hawkeye's being like a total douchebag kind of. And
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden like in the med bay, there's a guy who starts gushing blood from the neck. And
Mm-hmm.
they're like Hawkeye and he like the guy's really scared and like Hawkeye's like reassuring him and then they like fix it. So he goes from being like a total buffoon to like a very caring and competent surgeon.
And again, the graphic nature of the scene, I kept thinking when I was watching it, and I remember seeing it, all the clamps they had on the guy's neck,
Yeah.
while they were getting ready to stitch him up, because Hawkeye said, he goes, once I take my hand off of this, he goes, you got to put clamps on this,
Yes.
or he's going to spurt. And
Yeah.
I just thought that was so realistic looking. And I remember
Hmm.
as a 13 or 14-year-old kid, I saw that on the movie theater, and you think, my God, is that what it's like in a combat hospital?
Yeah. I'm like,
So,
I'm sure. But yeah, I did like those moments of contrast. And it did
mm-hmm.
make me, I will say the first like chunk of the movie, I was like, I know that like Hawkeye and Trapper, like they're the people that were like supposed to be on their side, but I was like, they're such assholes.
and
And
they
they
really are,
are,
they
but
are.
they're, you can be an asshole with like a heart of gold.
Mm-hmm.
And I can appreciate someone like that who can be kind of douchey, but like ultimately they're competent and they care about their patients and they want to do a good job. And that part of what offended them about Burns wasn't just his uptightness, but like uptightness and incompetence.
Right. And
Um,
yeah.
so
Um,
I my philosophy at work, and I may have shared this with you before, is like you can be incompetent or you can be rude, but I can't handle you being both.
Exactly.
And I think that is the gripe with Burns. Like these guys are kind of rude, but they're very competent.
Right. They're good at what they do.
Yes.
So,
And I mean also they're like not rude in the way that matters. They're crude maybe, but not rude. But like although I'm also a woman, so I probably wouldn't like them, but
no, but in the context of the times,
but in the yeah.
yeah, because I was thinking, like, if you think about it, this is a decade before the Mad Men era,
Hmm.
so it's like, women were treated, unfortunately, they were treated differently.
Yeah. And also to be fair, still in the
Oh, no, no,
military,
no,
not
no,
great.
not great. No.
Watching this movie, I was like, people always ask, like, oh, did you ever consider joining the military? And like, I hadn't. And then watching this, I'm like, hell no,
No, no,
absolutely not. Because I'm sure it may not be exactly the same,
it still goes on,
but
you know.
that
Yeah,
is
yeah,
still
yeah,
happens.
yeah.
But anyways, there's also another announcement that the government has decided that marijuana is a dangerous drug.
I love that. Even though there were studies that showed it was no more dangerous than alcohol or
Yes.
cigarettes. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Love these little asides
Mm-hmm,
put in.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So the next sort of big sequence relates to another character that we haven't really met yet. His nickname is Painless. He's the dentist. Because as Jim said, they have a lot of different medical professionals there. His actual full name, it's Captain Walter Waldowski.
Mm-hmm.
I think because the chaplain approaches Hawkeye and he says Captain Waldowski needs help, and he's like, "Oh, what's wrong with Painless?"
Yeah. the
Because he's
the
supposed to
pain
be like
they call him the painless Pole
the
because
painless
he's
pole.
Polish. Yeah.
Yes. But he's supposed to be like a very good, that's how good of a dentist he is.
Mm-hmm.
So he is having an issue and the chaplain Mulcahy wants him to help. So basically, Hawkeye goes to talk to him. He has had an episode of impotence. And now he's like, well, I must be gay. That is what that means. I'm a homosexual. And Hawkeye's like, it happens to everybody. It happens to the best of us. Like, it's fine. He was like, nope,
Not to me.
not to me.
Also, before this, we also learned that in camp he's known as the best equipped dentist
Yes.
in the army.
Yes. Um, and we're not talking about drills, people. So
There is a scene where people line up to see him in the shower,
yes.
and not
Yes.
not just the nurses.
Correct. Everybody's, trying to figure it out.
Right.
I'm going to be honest.
Go ahead.
The nickname, I didn't realize that the nickname Painless Pole was referring to him being Polish.
Oh, okay.
I
That's
thought it was referring to that.
to that. No.
Anyways, he's decided he's homosexual and so he's going to kill himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody, the other guys treat it like they think he's joking, but he's like dead serious. He asks them for suggestions on
Oh,
how to.
nice pun, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you. Um, didn't even mean to. He's asking for suggestions on how to do it.
Right.
And they're like, oh, the black capsule.
Love that. I even wrote that down because I remember that. That's like, oh, the black capsule.
And he's like, oh, what is that? And they're like, oh, that's how like Hitler killed himself and like Ava Braun and da da da. But it's really, they give him a sleeping pill. It's funny. They have like a last supper for him,
And that's exactly what it's supposed to look like.
all in their surgical gowns. Everybody's in like the whites, and
mm-hmm.
he's in his dentist whites. And like it's literally the last of they're all seated on the same side of the table having this like big meal. And then he like lays down in like a little
It's a coffin.
yeah, in a coffin, yeah, but it's like,
Yeah.
they've got it all plush. And also there's the whole thing of like the chaplain's like, I don't know if I can do last rites for someone who's like gonna kill themselves. But they sing Suicide is Painless. So this is where the the reprise of the song at a moment that makes sense. And then he's asleep because they gave him a sleeping pill. And he's asleep in like a bed. I was like, where is this bed in camp? They've got like gauzy curtains all around it. I was like,
It was what they used as the officers club. Remember, they
oh,
had a
okay.
tent set up where, and then it was like um, for the officers to go sit and relax and stuff. Because
Okay. Okay. I
yeah,
missed some things, obviously.
oh no, it's okay. Just I just remember from the book and watching the movie again. So
Okay. So Hawkeye talks to Dish, Lieutenant Dish. So she's actually about to go home. She got her orders. So she's about to get gone. And she is happy to do that because she does have a husband at home.
hmm
But Hawkeye's like, hey, do me like one more solid before you go. I need you to sleep with Painless to just kind of help him,
hmm
kind of get his mojo back. And she does. It's funny. She like goes in and then she's like she's like a ghost, um, under the sheet. But then and then like this like sort of like angelic like music playing.
Well, because he sort of lifts up the thing. He goes, "Just be with him for a little bit," and I think he lifts up the sheet so she can see why they call him the best equipped dentist
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the army. So maybe it'll, you know, entice her to, do him the favor.
Yes. So the next morning, Dish is loading up to leave, looking rather dazed until she looks directly at the camera and smiles.
Love the smile. So I even
Yes.
put, yeah, the smile. So
And then Painless seems back to his old self. He's in high spirits, just
like nothing ever happened.
exactly bopping around doing his thing.
Yeah.
So
You're like, hey,
the
big
plan
day.
worked, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. Got two jaws to rebuild. Come on, let's
Yep.
go. We got work to do.
Yeah, then, back to some regular shenanigans. They are doing surgery and need blood. And then like Radar shows up with like the big glass bottles full of blood and they're like, "Where'd you get this?" And basically there was like a helicopter crash and like someone died, so they just like
Mhm.
took the blood from the dead person and are like, "Here
Right.
you go."
Yeah.
Um but and then they all go sunbathe by the crashed helicopter.
With their
And
with the meal trays, to reflect the sun. I love that.
yeah.
Yeah. So
They were just living their best lives and they start talking about hot lips. They start talking about like women they're into and blah 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 and hot lips. And they wonder if hot lips is a natural blonde. She has blonde hair. So a lot of the women go shower together because then they like kind of flip the sign to like all only women are allowed in like the
hmm
shower tent, basically. So what they do is they kind of distract all the other women. Hey, can you come talk to me about this? Hey, look at this over here, blah, blah, blah. So that she goes by herself. And then once she gets to showering, they like pull a rope and pull down the sides of the tent so that they could all see her naked.
was and they're all gathered like in chairs and stuff
Yes, they're sitting like
outside.
it's like they're watching a movie.
hmm
Like
hmm
they're watching the show.
Yeah.
And naturally she like screams and freaks out. She's still got like shampoo in her hair. All the men start like cheering.
And
The
applauding.
women do go try to like help her and cover up, although she's even like kind of like, get away from me, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
storming away. And she storms into Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake's tent where he's just in bed with a woman, very casually. And she's like screaming at him, "You never discipline them. You let them get away with everything." And she's like screaming this at like the top of her lungs.
Oh
I can't,
yeah.
if I scream like that, the microphone won't pick it up. But um
Then it might hurt my eardrums.
yeah, so I'm trying to save everyone's ears. And when I like scream too high, it doesn't ever pick me up. But she's screaming, "You never, if you don't arrest them right now, I'm gonna resign my commission." And he's like, "Okay, you can resign your commission." And she's like, "My commission," which she obviously doesn't want to do. And she actually
Right.
ends up not doing because she's still around the whole rest of the movie.
hmm
But I guess she just gets over it. Uh, next kind of sequence. I feel like this is a movie not with like so much a plot, but with just like general sequences of things happening.
It's good.
Because it's like,
Yeah, it just, yeah, like you go from one thing to another.
yeah, because
So,
there's like Hot Lips and Burns, then there's like Painless, then there's like this Hot Lips thing, then the
mm,
next thing is Trapper and Hawkeye end up going to Japan. So first we see them playing golf, and then they're playing golf where the helicopters land, and they're
hmm.
very annoyed that the helicopter landing disrupts their golf game because they're getting like blow. That part is funny when like they're just getting blown around, like the golf umbrella blows out of Hawkeye's hands, and they're like, "Whoa, why don't they ever tell us where they're gonna land here?" So they're ultimately sent to Japan because there's the son of a congressman is there and he needs life-saving surgery. And this congressman was told that like Trapper is the best. And Trapper can bring one person, he brings Hawkeye with him.
Of course he does.
Of course.
Because they get to go play golf in
Right.
Japan.
That's the thing. They travel with their golf bags. They show up to this hospital in Japan with their golf bags.
Right.
And also, they just like walk into the medical ward. Like the people there are like, who are you? There is nothing that suggests that these people are in the army, that they are surgeons. They look just like guys who walked off the street with golf bags. And the woman at the front desk is like, who are you? I need to like call someone to like see who you are before you can just go in. And they just go in.
I love, we're the pros from Dover.
Yes. Um, and they basically are like, we're just gonna do surgery like right now. They're just like, let's get to it because they're trying to play golf. And because the guy like needs surgery. So they're just like, get us a room, let's get to it. It turns out too that the anesthesiologist there is someone that Hawkeye knows too.
Right, from school.
His name's like his name's like Waylay or something like that.
Me lay.
Melee.
Me
Oh yeah,
lay.
because he would that's
Yeah,
his joke.
yeah. Me the other part I like when they said, okay, this is what we need: the gas passer, we need new chest x-rays, and get us something to eat. Ham and eggs will be fine, steaks would be even better, and then get me one good nurse who could work without getting her boobs in the way. He doesn't say boobs.
Yes.
And the head nurse storms off, and then the other nurse that was standing by, she goes, how do you want your steak cooked? And they just look
Yeah.
at each other, and you hear that gong. It's like,
Yes.
we found our nurse.
Yes. Yes. But yeah, but they are, it is funny too, because they're like, get us a gas mask, like, get us new chest x-rays because the pictures you sent us were at least 48 hours old. And like, so there is some like actual medicine being done here.
Exactly.
Um, and they get to surgery. As I said, Hawkeye knows everybody. He knows the anesthesiologist Melee, and apparently that was his nickname because he would be like Melee,
You
Melee. That's how he would try to hit on women. So and then they're like, they do the surgery. Then like the MPs come to get them, and they're kind of escorted to the colonel's office, and he's kind of threatening them with trouble. And they're like, okay, well, how about we tell the congressman that you almost killed his son and we saved him, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So they get out of that. Then they're going. I assume they play golf at some point, but they're the next time we see them, they're at like a tea house with some ladies.
Well, remember, Melee runs a small clinic which is funded by a whorehouse.
Yes.
And he says, why don't you guys stop by after you play golf, and I'll get you, you can have dinner or whatever,
Yeah.
because it's all done at the same. There's a children's hospital in the same building as the whorehouse. So
Well, it's like in the Sting. It's like,
yeah.
the merry-go-round and then
Right, exactly. So yeah.
everybody needs a front. But I think they did call them like tea houses back in the day. Like on
They did.
Shogun,
Yeah.
they called them tea houses, but they're like, it's not for
Yeah.
tea.
Yeah.
But they're all in
Well,
their kimonos. And it turns out there's a baby. There's a Japanese baby that needs like life-saving surgery.
it's half Japanese, half American.
Okay.
Yeah, they
Well,
said,
in
oh,
any case, it's a
one of our
not,
soldiers left a present. Yeah.
yes, it's not a baby that like is technically like under their jurisdiction to be operating on, but they're like, it's a baby that needs surgery. We can do it.
Hmm.
So they take him to the army hospital though, which is not allowed, and the colonel tries to stop them. and they just basically shove gas in his face to knock him out and take pictures of him with one of the women from the tea house.
Mhm.
So it looks like he's sleeping with a sex worker, and they have that as blackmail, essentially. So they do a little pro bono life-saving surgery for a baby. So once again, they're like douchebags with a heart of gold.
Heart of gold. That's, just because, they were mean and threatened the lady with the umbrella and, trying to, and poking at her and stuff.
Oh yeah,
which,
like it's like
which
sword.
I know, which I thought was funny. So
And then after this, they go right back to Korea and like go immediately into surgery in their golf outfits, which are like the sort of like Rodney Dangerfield and Caddyshack golf outfits, right? It's like the plaid pants with like the tall socks. They're in their
uh-huh.
golf shoes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
They go right into surgery dressed like that. Then they go back to their tent, to the swamp, and they're like, "Huh, it's like the door is locked. All
Yeah.
the like shades are down. What's going on?" They knock. And Duke is like, "Oh, hold on a minute." So they're like, okay. They step back and take a look to the side of the tent. And Duke is sneaking someone out with like their head covered with a blanket. And who does that turn out to be? But Hot Lips,
No.
who Duke had said that he's like, no, like not attracted to her at all.
Mhm. You
Lies.
lies, you filthy liar.
Meanwhile, then, so Hot Lips, that letter she wrote earlier, it actually did get to the general, and he comes to visit to see what's up.
And he's just
Um,
as goofy as the rest of
he
them.
is. So the swamp is like, no, like it's everything's good here. Like Hot Lips is just like a mess. And he's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, blah blah blah. These women.
Yeah.
And they bring up football. And the general, he like runs a football team out of the main like hospital, I guess, that he overseas. And he's like, oh great, we'll play against you guys. Meanwhile, MASH does not have a team.
Yeah.
Like, and the general's team is good. So Hawkeye has an idea. Hawkeye knows everyone, first of all.
Evidently.
This man is like a mental Rolodex.
Well, plus you got to, so he and Trapper did play football for their respective colleges. So I guess,
Mm.
but yeah, you're right. So,
But
but
the fact that he knows specifically this
right.
person who was drafted into the army, played in the NFL, and is a neurosurgeon, like
Neuro,
that he's just
yeah.
like, boom, here's the name, call
Hmm.
this guy. So he's
Yeah.
basically like, he
Yeah,
tells
you're right.
Henry, you need to put in a request for a neurosurgeon, and it needs to be uh
Something,
this
is it Oliver Wendell Jones?
Oliver Harmon Jones.
Oliver Harmon Jones. Okay.
So
Sorry. I was thinking
he
of
is,
Oliver
and
Wendell.
he's played by Fred Williamson, who also was a professional football player. This is his first movie
Hmm.
role. His nickname,
Come on. It's funny for the time.
his nickname is racist. His nickname is Spear Chucker, which is a racist nickname.
I know. I'm not
Although
saying it's not.
someone asked him why he's called that, and he says because he threw javelin. Even when I was reading about this, even Robert Altman said it was racist
It
at the
was
time of this
supposed to
movie.
be. It was supposed to
Yes.
be. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, in the movie, he used to play for the 49ers. So they're like, he'll be a ringer and we can beat them. Also, we can bet money on it and then
Right.
we'll win money. Duke, who is a Southern gentleman,
Hmm. As he
well,
was in Steel Magnolias.
yes. Duke is not thrilled to have a black guy come in to stay with them. He's like, I got to live with you two Yankees.
Hmm.
And then now you're going to bring a black guy. He does not say black guy. He says Negro. Well, but in
hmm
his Southern parlance.
hmm
Um,
It's more derogatory.
yeah. And I did write that nickname is racist, I think. So they start prepping for the game. It reminds me of a lot of the other movies that we've watched where people are just like actively terrible.
So inept.
And then also you have Hot Lips leading the
Oh
cheerleaders.
my
And
God.
during the game, once we get to the game, this woman has not the foggiest idea of what's going on. They'll be
No.
cheering, and Henry is like, you dumbass, why are you cheering?
We got
Um,
a red flag. We got a red flag.
it reminded me of like from the early days of SNL when it would be like, Jane, you ignorant slut. Like that was the
Mm,
tone of
yeah,
Henry Blake to her.
Henry talking to
Um,
Margaret.
but basically they start placing bets like with the general on who's gonna win the game. Their plan is that they're gonna keep Jones out of the first half. And then they go double or nothing kind of
Right,
at
right. Go
halftime.
double the bet.
Because
Yeah.
they're sucking without
Oh,
him. They're getting
oh.
blown out.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would go double or nothing with the general. So the general's like, well, obviously I'm going to do that because we're winning by a lot. And then they bring Jones in the second half, and
Don't you love the music when the football game's playing though? It's like the circus music.
yes,
Dun, 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 dun. You know, it's like
it
this
is
real
crazy. Well, because also then people are just like dropping, like they're just falling over left and right.
and just the interludes when they stop, like the one part where Painless is like, "All right, but your fucking head's coming right off."
Yes.
He's like,
Or I love the one guy, the one black guy from MASH. He says the guy called him a slur. He called him it's the same slur from Remember the Titans, rhymes with Boone.
right,
Um, part of an animal name.
mm-hmm.
And they're like, he's just trying to get in your head. Tell him that you slept with his sister.
Right,
And
Gladys.
and then so that guy, so he says that, and then the guy on the other team starts trying to fight him, so he gets thrown out, which is good because he was one of their best players. So they're basically depending on Jones being really good and getting the best players on the other team like knocked out or thrown out, like
Mm.
injured, whatever.
Well, yeah, because they well, if you want to go, the other guy they get rid of on the other team, they do it by
Yeah, they stab him with a needle. They like give him anesthesia basically to knock him out. Uh,
and he thinks he's at a track meet.
Yeah. So, Hot Lips is a mess. She's trying to do cheers. She has no idea what's going on. She's like trying to come in the locker room at halftime, and they're like, "Go away! What are you doing?" Um, she's just an idiot, but she does seem to be like in on the fun now.
Oh yeah,
She's loosened up a bit.
she's one of the gang now. You know,
Yeah, she's like, I guess she was like, if you can't beat him, join him.
right?
Um,
Duke showed her the error of her ways.
Yeah, maybe that was it. She needed to loosen up a little bit.
Right.
Um so anyways, they finish with a trick play and they win. MASH wins, so they win all the money from the general. The general was really mad. At the end, then they're playing poker. Poker's a big thing too, because that was how they knew something was wrong earlier with Painless,
Right.
because he
They're all
lost a poker game and he said, "Who cares? Like it's just a card game." And Hawkeye was like, "Oh my God," he said, "it's just a card game."
yeah. It was like because that was like the second religion to him was the poker game. So
Mhm. But yeah, so after the football game, they're playing poker. Everybody, including Hot Lips. And this is when you see the dead body driving by. They all look sad about, but they don't ever say who it is. But like, if you
yeah,
know the book, based on what's in the book, that is Ho
Ho
John.
John. Yeah.
But yeah, that was like one thing I like didn't love because it's just like it was just confusing without that context.
No, you're absolutely right, and it should have been, it could have been done a lot better. It could have been because that was a big part of the story, not a big part, but a very poignant part of the story in the book was, because they liked Ho John
Yeah.
and because they were trying to get him out of not going to serve in the army because they gave him something to make his heart race
Hmm.
and it didn't work. And then so he got conscripted into the South Korean army and then that subsequently got killed. So
Yeah. Because it didn't make sense for them to just like look sad at like a random person dying. Because like if
right.
you're a surgeon, you're kind of at some point it's just like,
Yeah, you sort of get
people die every day. Like
mm-hmm.
it's just
and
how it
it,
is.
and I mean they, to me that it wouldn't have made the movie any more darker. I don't think it
Right.
actually, it probably would have added more to the humanity of them, or that, the feeling that war is hell, that
Right.
war
I feel like there could
sucks.
have been like a line, even
Yeah,
if they just like toasted like their martinis or something,
right,
it would have
yeah,
been
to
like,
Ho John, the
oh,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
that's him.
yeah.
So yeah, that's a complaint I have. So,
I,
I'll get my Ouija board and talk to Robert Alton.
I was getting ready to say if
Altman.
you, I was going to say if you, the next time you have a séance or something, bring him
Yes.
back and
When
say,
I commune with the dead, I will be like, Robert Altman, I have a complaint for you.
I got a little thing to pick with you.
I have something to say. But then some orders come in, and it's time for Duke and Hawkeye to go home. I love this part because Hawkeye finds out and he's like ready to go home. Because, like I said, these people are not, they were drafted. They're not like,
Mm-hmm.
they're not here out of a sense of honor. They're here because they were told to.
Houlihan was the only one, and I guess Duvall were the only ones
Yeah.
that like. Well, and Henry, because he
Hmm.
talks about his many years in the army.
Yeah. But yeah, there's very few people. And even he's like very irreverent to it because
Mm-hmm.
he's like, we're here to
Mm-hmm.
do a job. But yeah, like the rest of them are like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah, oh
So as
yeah.
soon as Hawkeye gets the orders, he goes running into the operating theater and there's Duke is doing surgery with Jones. Look at
Mm-hmm.
this.
Mm-hmm.
Racism solved.
And Margaret is assisting.
Yes. Yes. Look at everybody getting along.
I know.
Um
I know.
and he's like, "Oh, can I go?" They're like literally a person's head is opened up. He's like, "Oh, can I go?" And Jones is like, "Can we like close this guy's head up first?"
Yeah,
Because he's like immediately as soon as Hawkeye says that they have orders to go home, Duke is like having visions of like reuniting with his wife and his kids,
mm-hmm.
which is kind of sweet, especially because like you were banging that lady next to you, but okay.
I know,
Um,
really, yeah. And he kind of looks at her like, oh,
mm,
I get to leave, So yeah, so it's been nice, but hey,
sayonara.
ooh,
Um,
ooh, very good, yeah, uh-huh, yeah,
yeah, thank you. They say that
mm-hmm.
on the Japanese radio, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but then it's time to go. They're told, your driver will come to take you back. And once again, they're like, nope, we'll steal the Jeep. And once again, they're driving down the highway, just
And
bopping along, wind in their hair to Jeep. And then the last announcement is that the movie tonight is MASH.
which I thought was really clever,
Yeah.
and done in the same though kind of stumbling way, watches our, as our heroes or whatever, like cut their
Yeah.
way through, the blood and the guts, and it was just well done.
Yeah, yeah. Every announcement was like this person like just got handed this information and like is not maybe good at reading comprehension.
Right, or yeah, just yeah, for the first time he's just trying to read it. So
But
and
yeah,
they
I
announced the
think
cast, and I love the driver. I'm sorry, it's the one that, goddamned army. That was his only line throughout the whole movie. Remember, he drove him
Oh
in
yeah.
Japan. Goddamned army.
Oh yeah, because when they were in Japan, weren't they? They were like in like a parade.
Yeah, they are. Well, I think if the streets were just crowded or whatever, but
Yeah,
it was
it
like,
looked like a because also the way they were like sitting, it looked like they were like
yeah.
at a parade float. But yeah, that's MASH. I'm trying to think. Did we cover everybody who was in it? We talked about Donald Sutherland, Elliot Gould, Tom Skerritt, Sally Kellerman, who plays Hot Lips. She's been in some other Altman
Mm-hmm.
films. She was also in Back to School.
Oh, which is one
Uh,
of my favorites with
it's my
Rodney.
yeah, that's like my reference for Rodney Dangerfield and
Oh,
the
that's a
one where
good one.
the one where he's a dog. There's an
Oh,
animated film where he's a dog. Um,
okay.
she was also like on Twilight Zone. She's a voice in the 1980s Sesame Street TV movie Follow That Bird,
Oh, didn't
which I
know
grew
that.
up watching. Yeah.
Oh, okay, didn't know that.
We talked about Robert Duvall.
John.
Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake is played by Roger. It's like Bowman. He hasn't really been in anything else, but do you know what he did? Bowen, Roger Bowen.
Mm,
He was one of the co-founders of Second City in Chicago.
no kidding.
Yes.
That's interesting.
And he wrote 11 novels, so he considered himself a writer primarily, who only moonlighted as an actor.
Well, he was very deadpan,
Yes.
in this. So.
Yes, which I think worked. I think worked.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. Dish was played by Joanne Flug. She was in a lot
Flug.
of TV stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we covered everybody else who
Yeah,
has
we
really had a big role. But yeah, that's MASH. I will say, I think I told you about this. When I first watched it, I was like, one, like not that much is happening. And two, well, I these people are such assholes. And really not nice to women at all. Um, but it they grew on me
it
throughout the
is sort of.
movie.
I was going to say it's a to me it was a combination of the times, and even in 1970 it was not, it was considered, not really politically correct, some of the things.
Mhm.
But again, they were portraying something that was 15 years, supposed to be 15 years in the past from then,
Yeah.
But in the 70s, women, it was getting better. I won't say that, but some of the ways that they treated the women and stuff, that was trying to get better. The civil rights movement had started to take place. So, there
Mm.
was, that I think it sort of poked at all of those institutions.
Yeah.
The military, the government, the war, race relations, equal rights, women, and so on. How people are treated.
Yeah.
Even to where how they, like you said, the way they treated the poor little Japanese baby, and then and Hojon, you know,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know, but and then some sort of, it was like maybe some medical humor, comes.
Yeah. I
Lord knows
appreciate medical
I
humor.
was going to say we've been around, some the medical, field where people make. There is a dark humor to in working in
You
a
have to, I
hospital.
think it's like
Yeah,
the medicine field, it's a sort of like you have to laugh to keep from crying
you
kind of
do,
thing. Because like people die, like I said, people die all the time, right? Like
exactly. People
so you
suffer.
have to kind of joke about it.
Yeah, and some of that frat boy humor, I think,
Hmm.
at
Hmm.
the time
It
too.
did remind me, I was like the swamp men are like, are they the deltas in Animal House? I was like, that's
Pretty much.
they are like them.
Yep. Heavy drinkers, and then,
Right.
but heart of gold. They
Yes.
had their good points. So,
Yes, yes. So
uh,
they grew on me. And I think there is something to be said about like, in it's nice to see a like portrayal of war where it's not like about like heroism because like it is bad.
it is.
Like
Yeah, where it's not glorified.
yeah, like war is hell, right? Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing people say like and it is. And also these are just especially like I said earlier like people who are drafted that are not like they're
Mm-hmm.
not into like the sort of mystical ethos of the military, that sort of like
Yeah.
mythic glory kind of thing. Like they're like,
Yeah. You get caught up in that culture, and then it's like
yeah,
for God and country.
right. And for them, they're like, I'm just here so I won't get fined, to quote Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'm a surgeon who's good at my job, so I'm gonna do my best to like save people's lives. But like, I'm not into any of this. I'm trying
Right.
to do this, and then as soon as I'm allowed to go home, back
And
to
that
my
was
life.
one of the running jokes about the TV series MASH was the fact that it lasted longer than the actual Korean War did. So
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
ran longer than the war. But
Yeah. Yeah. And I
um,
mean, there's a reason why like it isn't like the finale of MASH. It's like the most watched thing on TV
still
that like ever happened.
ever happened. So, by the way, the opening scene of the movie is also the opening scene of each episode of MASH.
Okay, so like the
It's
helicopter flying
helicopter. It's
around.
the same perspective from the aerial view, and it's the
Mm.
helicopter and everything coming in. And then, like
I
I said,
still can't like imagine being a wounded soldier and you're strapped to the side of a helicopter. So you're just outside.
so I will tell you, this is a true story. I will tell you, when I first went to work for the VA back in 1979, we had an exercise, and it was a medical evacuation of an area because there was an atomic bomb that had exploded. This was the scenario, and they had to evacuate people via helicopter from our hospital in Richmond, Virginia, to another site. It was like they were leaving from there because of
Mhm.
that they had the old Huey helicopters before they had Blackhawks, and they had put stretchers on the skids on the outside, and they had actual people strapped into those, and they took off, and they didn't go very far, but they took off. These people were strapped into those things. I That's the honest to God's truth.
Oh my God. That seems
And I thought
terrifying.
that was crazy, but they
I
fit
wouldn't
as
make
many
it to
people
surgery
as
because I would have a heart attack.
they fit as many people as they could, like inside, but it didn't hold as much. So they had the stretchers on the so one on each side, so it would balance the weight.
Wow.
So anyway,
That
so
I that's what I kept thinking when I saw that part. I was just like,
yep.
terrifying,
Mm-hmm.
terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that there is something to be said for a portrayal of war that is not like glorifying, like you said. That's just like
Mm-hmm.
this is kind of people like in the shit every day,
Mm-hmm.
just doing what they have to do, like blood, guts, viscera, literally.
Mm-hmm. And just and wash, rinse, repeat.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
And
It,
then like
it's
doing what they have to do to like get themselves through it, whether it's having some little Korean kid make them martinis and like fucking around with people and giving each other dumb nicknames and stuff. Also
right.
reminded me of Animal House.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, like I think that's like as I watch the movie more, like I could come to appreciate like that part of it.
Yeah. We're
And
some
not
sort of escape from that horrible reality.
right, right.
We can
Exactly.
relate, I think, to we when we talk to some veterans and who resort to other forms of medication, self medication, or self
Hmm.
preservation.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
To
like we said, people within like our own kind of professions of like
mm-hmm.
how they people
Sure.
deal with things in
Mm-hmm.
like the medical profession, which is difficult
Yeah.
to do. So,
Once you start, you know, talking and working with that. So there were differences, like I said, between the movie and the TV show. The TV series was more lighthearted, still poked fun, but in a more lighthearted way. It wasn't nearly as dark. There were some
hmm
characters that didn't carry over. The dentist and
hmm
Duke. It was just
hmm
Trapper John and Hawkeye, and then Radar, and of course Frank Burns was kept on throughout for most of the series.
hmm
The character Larry Linville finally left, and then they replaced him with a similar character, Charles Winchester. So who was sort of a pompous, kind of a stuck up kind of guy. But
hmm
yeah, for the most part, all the characters, there was Blake, and then Blake left, and then Potter came in, Colonel Potter. But yeah, the show was good. Don't get, and it was a staple. I mean, it was for must see TV. That was one of the staples of the lineup for TV. And it ran for what? How many years? 11 years, something like that. Eight
yeah,
years.
it was
I can't remember.
yeah, 11 seasons.
11 seasons.
Oh,
So,
and then they got a spinoff. This that's why Trapper John, that name sounded familiar to me because
mm-hmm.
there was a spinoff called Trapper John MD, right?
Pernell Roberts played him as an
Mm.
older man, and then there was a spinoff of MASH with Klinger and Colonel Potter, where I think he opened up a practice in the States, and Klinger worked for him. I think it lasted for
Mm.
maybe after MASH or something like that. I think it was called. So
Mm.
um, short lived. Radar, like I said, was the only Gary Berghoff like you said, was the only character that transitioned from the movie to the TV show, as far as the same person playing the role.
Hmm.
So, but the TV show was good. Like I said, just had a different sense of humor about it.
Yeah, and I guess if it's on TV, then it has to
Yeah, I
be.
mean, if they remade it now, we see TV shows now that they're a little bit more realistic, and then have a little bit more, would take liberties with language and so on and so forth. But they couldn't do that back then, or be as explicit.
Yeah.
So
And it was on like network TV. Now it could be
yes,
on a streaming service and have
exactly.
whatever.
Yeah. Could be one of the HBO or
Yeah.
whoever, even cast Disney. I don't know.
You never know. I mean,
Yeah,
they get a little bit darker in some of their
in some of their
Marvel and Star
yeah.
Wars things. So,
So well, I'm
um,
I'm glad you got the opportunity to watch it. I hope that
yes.
it wasn't a waste of two 2+ hours of your time.
No,
I,
definitely not. I don't think any, I don't, well, I don't think watching anything is a waste of my time because it's always something to,
mhm,
take in. But I think, again, this is another one of those things that is a sort of classic and revered movie for a reason. And even if I bristle at first when I watch it, I was like, ooh, the first scene where we see a woman, she's being just like
oh, I
harassed
know. Yeah.
totally. Like, oh God. But it's like, that's real. Um, but yeah, no, I think that it's like a good, interesting movie. I think that, like the pace is not necessarily something that we're always used to, in terms of like plot and stuff. But I think it is really kind of about just like the general experience
hmm
of working at MASH.
It's almost like watching a home movie, I think, in a way. Don't
Hmm.
a little bit, don't you? There's no pacing or anything like that. It just sort of takes its time and it's just like you said, showing one scene after another, as opposed to
Yeah.
there are running gags throughout
Hmm.
the loudspeaker thing, and then the thing about the Jeep. Did Hawkeye steal that
Yes.
Jeep? No, sir, no, we didn't steal. He didn't steal that Jeep. That's the one he arrived in. Well, yeah, he anyway. So, but that sort of thing. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so well, good. Well, I'm glad you got the opportunity to watch it then, and if you hadn't, and like you said, now you've seen a film by Robert Altman. So
Yes, I'm expanding my like, experience with the great uh American directors because
yeah,
I think
so
I don't know that I had seen like a Kubrick before we watched.
from A Clockwork Orange.
Yes, there. But yeah, just expanding the view and, I expand your view into like chick flicks of the 90s and you expand mine into like 70s classics. So
Well, I don't know
that's why we're here.
exactly. I was going to say it was our reason for starting it, and just to show and other people our from our range of experiences what movies that had an impact on us, and then hopefully you and I, introduce each other to movies that we haven't seen, which you have done with me as well. So I never took the opportunity or had a reason to watch Spice World, until, you brought that up. And I have to admit, I've enjoyed every movie that we've watched. So,
Good, good. And same,
yeah.
same.
So, in different ways and in different degrees, but I've never gone through, never watched one of our movies and said, "Oh my God," said, why would Lindsay ever watch this? So,
Sometimes I feel that way about my picks, but
oh no, not at all. No, I've laughed and enjoyed every one of your picks. So some of them I've seen before, but some of them I hadn't. So I've enjoyed the experience of like you said, of watching new things or seeing new people that I hadn't seen before. So,
Mhm.
or seeing people that I had seen in other things, not knowing that they were in the movies that you liked. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice. And like I said, we're finding some through lines. Tom
yeah,
Skerritt
I
apparently
know.
is a
Evidently
frequent
was
collaborator, a
was
friend
cashing
of the
checks.
pod, friend of the pod, Tom Skerritt.
There you go.
Um, so yeah, we'll have to I'm gonna have to make a spreadsheet to start like tracking these people. But
Good idea. I'm going to start marking that too. Like go through the movies and see. All right, where's is there a common? What's the commonality? So we'll
yeah,
see. Anyway, so that kicks us off for the week of or the month of November for Veterans Day. In addition to Thanksgiving coming up too, but I wanted to give a nod to our veterans.
absolutely. That's great. So yeah, and we've got some other things coming up. We've got some Thanksgiving things. We also have
Mm-hmm.
another movie that will be timely tying into the general pop culture world of the moment.
Okay.
So yeah, I think everybody watch MASH, check out the movie, and then you can also check out the show and see if they're different. As mentioned, Robert Altman would not want you to check out the show, but uh, he's gone, so what's he gonna do?
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I have some gripes for him anyways. So anything else that you want to add, Jim?
No, just again, like I said, I appreciate you giving this a look, and then and your insight. I always enjoy hearing how you feel about watching a movie that you hadn't seen before, especially one that from way back in the day, all the way back to 1970. So,
Yes. That's
um, when I
it
was a
predates
teenager,
me. Yeah, I
yes,
was
it
gonna
does.
say my parents were children.
Yeah,
I
predates your
was
mom, your mom and dad, I think, a little
yeah.
bit. So,
I mean, they were kids. My dad was 10, my mom was 5 when
I
this
was
came out.
13. So,
I mean, you're not like you and my dad are not that far off, but
no, no, but
I
even
was
still,
minus 20.
oh yeah,
I
you
was
were
not even a thought.
no, no.
So but yeah,
So
I think it's worth checking out always.
good.
And everyone, wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe so you can get all of our episodes when they come out on Mondays. Please leave us a rating or a review, especially if it's nice, or else we are going to have you sent away in a straitjacket to be evaluated. Uh, or we'll punch you in the face like Trapper John. Uh, you can also follow us on Instagram at Some of Our Parts Pod. You can see all the other movies we've talked about. We are covering a wide range, and we're trying to, of late, we've been a little more thematic. Football season, spooky season. We're getting into the holiday season, so there will be some themed picks around that. You can also get little previews before episodes come out about what they're going to be about and whatever else that occurs to us to share. And until next time, bye bye.
Take care.
That is all.